Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Quincy Carrier Live, the show where we go about an hour talking about Browns football, other subjects, and whatnot. A ton to get into this week, right? The Browns had a pretty disappointing performance versus the Cincinnati Bengals, but some things did bounce their way as far as draft order goes. So that becomes a lot more interesting for the Cleveland Browns. We got Myles Garrett putting his foot down, and a lot of people wondering, what does that mean for the Cleveland Browns organization going forward? Are they going to be forced to, worry about a Myles Garrett trade request potentially in the future? We're going to talk about that. We're going to go through some mock drafts. We might even, if we have some time, look at some film of some of these guys. But first and foremost, let's talk about it, right? A lot of people are concerned, and I think rightfully so, concerned about Myles Garrett being unhappy. Now, this is for a number of reasons. Some of these reasons are directly related to Myles Garrett's situation in Cleveland, right? Myles is not happy not winning. Myles is not happy with how this season has went down. He has expressed that he wants to stay with the organization long term, but he also has desires that he wants met as a player in his career. So a lot of people concerned, right? Whenever you hear an athlete might want out in Cleveland, the national media runs with it. A lot of people run with it. Our imaginations run wild. And now all of a sudden we're doing, is Myles Garrett going to get traded to New York? Are the Browns going to trade Myles Garrett if he requests a trade? Is Myles going to request a trade to be moved? Now, the Browns' history on trade request is pretty solid when it comes to this, right? If a player requests a trade in the last 4 years, that means nothing. So I don't think Myles is going to request a trade anytime soon. And I don't think even if he does, the Browns are going to try to allow cooler heads to prevail. So overall, the first message I want to give on this is don't panic, right? Like, Myles is just expressing some things over the long-term future of this team, but I don't think this is like, oh, Myles is going to request a trade if you don't do the thing that he wants at quarterback. I don't think he's holding the team hostage or anything like that, or trying to enforce his will on the team. I think he's just frustrated with how this season has gone, like a lot of guys, but he understands the business and everything else of what needs to happen for this team to get better. And I think there are three main things that Myles Garrett wants that would keep Myles Garrett happy, right? So if you boil down what he wants into three things: one, he wants to be competitive. He said this himself. He wants to play meaningful football in the month of January. He wants to do more of what they did last year, more of what they did in 2020, less of what they've done in 2019 and 2018 and 2017 and on, right? And even in 2022 and obviously 2024. Another thing that Myles Garrett wants is help, right? I think they've left him out there on the island sometimes. And he also wants to feel like he has a role in this organization's future. This is a guy who owns part of the Cleveland Cavaliers, right? So he wants voice or standing in whatever organization he's a part of. So how do you accomplish these three things with Myles Garrett? Let's start with competitive, meaningful football, right? First, let's unpack that term and talk about what that means. Does it mean that the Browns have to be a Super Bowl contender to keep Myles? No. That means that the Browns have to be a good team, though, to keep Myles. They have to prove that years like this are aberrations and not the norm for the franchise. They have to prove that they're not going to dip as low as this, and that this is a special circumstance, right? If you ask Browns fans, the one argument for the season is, hey, it got tanked by Deshaun Watson. Now, there are other problems on the team than Deshaun Watson. Nobody's ignoring that. But if you ask a lot of people what the issue with the win-loss record is and why the Browns are so uncompetitive this year, it goes with Deshaun Watson horribly underperforming expectations. Now, if that's where they're sitting and they know that's the case, that's going to affect how Myles feels about certain plans at the quarterback position. Like if the Browns' plan was to bring back Deshaun, which I don't think is the case, right? I don't think they're that tone deaf that they would have been like, no, we're going to bring back Deshaun for another year. But let's say the Browns' plan was to bring back Deshaun for another year. I think that would be something that Myles Garrett would be rightfully kind of annoyed with. And he would go into the season annoyed with that idea. And then the season would go out. And if it doesn't play out well, he's going to be annoyed with that too. And that's going to factor into how long of an extension he's going to want, right? You got to build your trust with him, and you got to build some kind of trust between the organization and Myles Garrett that the Browns can play meaningful football in the month of January. Then there's the second thing, right, that Myles wants. Help. He wants help. Now, we always focus on help when it comes to a player on a specific side of a ball, right? If we're talking about Myles Garrett and we talk about what's help for Myles Garrett, we're always going to focus in on other pieces on the defense. Now, I think Myles has some good pieces on that defense. You're going to get JOK back, hopefully. You got Denzel Ward as a co-running mate there, right? Two of the best players at their division with Myles Garrett. I don't think you're lacking a ton of help on defense, but you could certainly add to it by getting somebody like an Abdul Carter or something like that in the draft, Mason Graham, to kind of add to what you already have with Myles Garrett. So there's that, right? You can help him on defense. And I always argue that help on defense and making your defense really good is a good way to make sure you can get away with less at the quarterback positions. If you look at the teams that's gotten away with less at the quarterback position, look at the defenses they have. You never see a mediocre quarterback having a good year with the team with a bad defense. Like if that has happened, let me know, but I think it's barely happened if it's ever happened. Usually you can get away with some mediocre quarterback play with a good defense. Why? Because defense gives you a huge margin of error. You can turn the ball over. It doesn't matter if you got a great defense. You can go 3 and out, and it doesn't matter. You got a great defense, right? It gives you a large margin of error for quarterback play when you have a great defense behind you. So if the Browns want to get better quarterback play or get away with what they can get at quarterback, obviously stacking on defense, relying on your 2 franchise players in Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward, and getting that thing done that way is an option. But much like how we overlook how much help on defense is a huge help for offense, we overlook how much help on defense will help on offense is helpful to the defense, right? What Myles Garrett is probably tired of, like I'm just taking a random guess out here, right? Stab in the dark. I bet one of the things he's tired of is being in charge of a defense that has to go on the field so often because the offense can't get anything going. And then when the defense does not have success when put in an impossible situation, they blame him, right? A lot of this stuff is about legacy, right? Myles Garrett is a talented enough player to be worried about his legacy, to be worried about how he's seen, and to be worried about how he'll get into Canton because he's a first ballot Hall of Famer for sure, but he wants to not just be known as Myles Garrett, first ballot Hall of Famer, right? We talk about how does he separate himself from TJ Watt when both of these guys are first ballot Hall of Famers. Well, if Myles Garrett has more success on the field, is the anchor of some top 10 defenses, then that changes how we view him. We, instead of saying Myles Garrett, first ballot Hall of Famer, we say Myles Garrett, one of the greatest of all time. Myles Garrett, the Randy Moss of edge rushers, right? We start putting him into context that I think he can get to as far as his potential as a player. And one of the things holding him back, and that's been consistently holding him back in his time as a Cleveland Brown, is the fact that the offense for the Cleveland Browns has not been consistent. There have been a lot of years where I'm talking about the Browns after the game, and I got to throw this sentence out here. What is the sentence? Well, the offense kept giving the ball back to the defense. The offense kept giving the ball back to the other team. The offense kept putting the defense in a tough spot. And then the defense broke. But when you look at the end score, nobody cares about how it happened. They just look at it and go, oh, the Browns gave up over 20 points. We did a whole video about this, about how the Browns defense kind of got blamed for having to deal with the excessive amount of turnovers that the offense got at the end of 2023. We're all talking about the road defense, right? That kind of stuff has to slow down. Now, if you're the Browns, how do you build an offense that keeps the defense off the field without being sure that there's a franchise quarterback in your future? 3 words for you. Y'all want to guess the 3 words that I have right here? Y'all want to guess the 3 words that I'm about to say? Hope you can see it. Run the ball. That is how you do it. Now, you don't just like blindly run 400 times and call it a day and say that that's running the ball. But what I did see when they had DTR out there was, I think, insight to why DTR was out there in the first place, right? Because if you watch that game, a lot of people came away with the thought process of, well, with the thought of, hey, why was DTR out there? He clearly isn't better than Jameis Winston. He's not executing the offense at the same level as Jameis Winston. So why did the Browns have him out there? Was it just to purposely lose this game? And I think that's a conclusion a lot of people have come to. I've come to a slightly different conclusion. I don't think DTR was put out there because they truly wanted to see what they have in DTR. I think that was a side effect of the real reason they put him out there, but I don't think that's why they did. I don't think they put DTR out there because they felt like they wanted to lose this game. I think that's a side effect, but it wasn't really the intended reason for putting him out there. I think the Browns went into this game fully intent on winning it. I think they put DTR out there so they can run more of the RPO stuff in this offense. Like, that's why he was in there. If you look at the stuff that DTR actually had success in this game, it was all that RPO stuff. If you look at what the Browns have been wanting to add to this offense ever since they got Deshaun Watson in, is a lot of that RPO stuff. Like, I think Kevin has a bit of a love affair with that RPO stuff. He's been trying to add it in. That's one of the things Ken Dorsey was really good at building in Buffalo, was all that RPO stuff. But what do Deshaun Watson and Jameis Winston have in common? They're both terrible at RPO stuff. And now that Jameis Winston is throwing 1 million interceptions, I think they looked at it and say, hey, let's see what this RPO stuff looks like. And if we're going to run the RPO stuff, we got to run somebody who actually has the skill set to do it. Let's put in DTR. I think that's why DTR was in there. And when I watched that RPO stuff, I saw a lot of stuff that was working. This game, right, where they broke out all the RPO stuff, was the most successful, most consistent the Browns run game has looked all season. Like, correct me if I'm wrong. I think statistically that was the case. I think aesthetically that was the case. This was the best the Browns run game had looked all season. It also happened to be the game where they broke out a ton of the RPO and the design quarterback run stuff. And it was actually successful, right? We go to the box score in this one, and Jerome Ford had 92 yards on 11 carries, 8.4 yards per carry. Now, he had like a giant run to start the game. But Dorian Thompson-Robinson, 9 carries, 49 yards, 5.4. And they did some of these design runs. The one drive they got against the Bengals, which I thought up until DTR threw an interception, was their nicest drive of the game, was a drive where they went heavy with the RPO, heavy with DTR running the ball. And it made me wonder, maybe that's what they're looking for in their next quarterback. Maybe they want somebody who can be comfortable running the football. If they understand that they can't get a franchise guy at the position, they're like, okay, the best way to play low yield quarterback play is to get somebody who can rely on their ability to run, because they're not going to turn the ball over. You're still going to have a productive offense. So you look at Justin Fields, who certainly has that RPO skill set, is somebody you can go to. If the draft, right, you start looking at guys like Riley Leonard, who has an RPO skill set for sure. Some people have brought up Will Howard. I'm not completely sold on that one, but Will Howard is a name you could throw out there. And then Jalen Milroe's probably the top RPO quarterback guy. I don't think Shador does a ton of RPO stuff out there with Pat Shermer, right? But it feels like the RPO stuff is part of what the Browns want to incorporate in the future of the Browns quarterback play. Now, DTR, he has the skill set to run it, but just look at DTR and look at the size of that defensive end. He ain't got the build to do that, right? He's not going to live if he keeps running the ball 9 times a game, keeps taking these hits. And like, it's not just that DTR is super skinny and not really the most bulky build. That's one thing. He also has the propensity to take the worst hits possible. Like he launches himself into these defenders in a way that's just not productive for being healthy. So that's how I think the Browns are going to try to stabilize the offense, right? They're going to see what their options are at quarterback. If they feel like somebody is available that they could run a solid traditional offense with, I think they'll go with that. But if they don't see those options there, I think they're willing to get creative. And I think the way they'll get creative is, hey, let's get somebody in there who can run, who can scoot a little bit, right? I think Justin Fields would be there and would make a ton of sense for them. But I think that's going to be a huge part of what they want to do. Now let's get to this third thing that Myles Garrett wants. VIP. He is the franchise player of this team. And I think part of what he was saying is that he's going to use his privilege as the franchise player of this team, right? Joe Thomas famously never used the privilege of being the franchise player of the team to kind of get things to happen in the right direction. And that's not a negative thing on Joe, but that's just something Joe didn't do. Myles wants to use that privilege. He wants his voice to matter in the decisions the Cleveland Browns make going forward. This is somebody who has made moves in sports that would signal that he cares about that, right? He always talks about that. And he also owns part of the Cavs, right? He's interested in sports ownership. All of that signals to me that Myles Garrett wants his voice to be heard in the Browns room when they're making decisions, when they're doing that. Now, that doesn't mean that the organization hears Myles Garrett and does what Myles Garrett says without question. That just means that you make sure that Myles Garrett is heard, that you make sure that you go out of your way to bring stuff up to Myles that might affect him, that might affect the quarterback position, right? That's what you got to do. You got to placate your franchise player. You got to make him feel involved. And then, if it makes sense to involve him in a decision or to take his input, go ahead and take his input, right? That's part of having a franchise player. I know it's been a long time since the Browns have had a true franchise player, but that's part of it, right? When you have a guy who's so good, his number is synonymous with your football team, you have to placate your franchise player. It's nothing new. And he's going to want things to be done that makes him feel like some of these issues that he's having are going to be addressed. And if you're the Browns, you have to do a good job of making the argument that the moves you are making are going to make this team better sooner than later. Because you can't lose a generational talent like Myles Garrett. I heard people already jump to the let's just trade him for 3 first-round picks take. That's a horrible idea. Myles Garrett is worth so much more than 3 first-round picks. You can get 3 first-round picks and not find somebody who's going to be as productive as Myles Garrett. You want to build around dudes like Myles Garrett. You want dudes like Myles Garrett to retire for your football team and be there forever and be stewards for your franchise. You don't want to see Myles Garrett have his best days with somebody else and then retires like a Seahawk or something like that. That just disgusts me. You want to keep guys like that. You want to keep them around. And part of keeping guys like that around is making them understand that they're part of this too. They're not just employees. They're not just here to collect a check. Myles Garrett is a vital part to this organization. He's a vital part to any free agent's appeal to this organization. He's a vital part to any draft picks appeal to this organization. He's a huge part of this. You got to have him feel involved. You got to have him feeling like his input matters. And that is one of the most important things. So if you're the Browns and you want to make sure that Myles Garrett's happy, it's pretty simple. You got to get to competitive football sooner than later, which, look, I think they're in lockstep about that. I don't think the Browns are going into next season thinking that they're just going to like tank and try to get Arch Manning or something like that. I think they're going into next season with the hope to be a playoff team. You know, they're not like, it's kind of like how Pittsburgh never rebuilds, right? We thought Pittsburgh was rebuilding this year with Russ and Justin Fields and all of that. And now they came in with the intention to make the playoffs. And now they're going to make the playoffs. Same is true for the Browns. They're not trying to rebuild for the next 2 years and shut it all down and strip all the parts. They didn't make any of those moves during the trade deadline that would signal that, right? They didn't even get rid of Juan Thornhill. They didn't get rid of Dalvin Thomas. And the only people that got rid of were 2 guys on expiring deals. So they're not about to strip this whole team down for parts and give up. They're going to try to make the playoffs next year. So I think Myles and the franchise, they're in lockstep with that one. When it comes to help, I think help on defense is on the way. The Browns get the number 1 overall pick. I mean, not the number 1 overall pick, but if the Browns get like a top 5 pick, they can get Abdul Carter, who would be tremendous help. They can get Mason Graham, who would be tremendous help. They can get Ashton Genty, who could be tremendous help, right? Like they're going to have options there to make something that affects Myles Garrett closely much better. Now, on the offensive side of the ball is where they have the most work to do. They got to get a solution at tackle because Jed Wills is not the answer. Jermaine Ifedi isn't. And DeJuan Jones has to lose weight and come back from a broken tibula. It's going to be really tough for DeJuan Jones, right? Jack Conklin has injury history, so you're worried about him at right tackle. Like right now, you got to operate if you're the Browns like you ain't got no tackles. And this is not a great offseason to need 2 tackle positions. So how are you going to operate that? That's going to be a tough one for Andrew Berry to figure out. But that's going to be on the top of his list. You got to get some running backs, right? Nick Chubb, you probably bring him back, but who else do you add to that room? Do you keep Jerome Ford? Do you move on from Jerome Ford? Got to answer that question. Wide receiver, you feel fine. Tight end, you can add a name or 2, but it's not that big of a deal if you don't. And then quarterback. What direction you want to go, right? Like, I think that's going to be a big thing. I think we talked about it earlier when we were talking about how the Browns' mindset at quarterback might change based on the things that they want to add to evolve this offense. They're going to do some play action, which we saw Justin Fields do. They're going to do some RPO, which we've seen Justin Fields do. And same thing is true for some of the other options in the draft, right? So that's going to be something that they look at. I wouldn't exclusively look at the quarterback position for the Cleveland Browns this year and assume that you're just going to run the old school Shanahan style offense. I think they want to do some RPO. I think they want to move the ball down the field. I think they want to add some new things to this offense because before we had the whole Watson tanking the offense conversation, there were still issues with this offense feeling a little bit stale. So they need to add to it. They need to evolve it. I said that at the end of last year. I still think that's the case. And seeing them add RPO wrinkles, get the ball down the field, I think that's going to be something that they continue to consider going forward. And then lastly, you need to make sure that he feels like the franchise player that he is, right? You need to include him on stuff. You need to make him feel like his voice matters. And also, like, part of Myles, like, going to the media about this tells me that there's been a failure in just making sure that that's the case, because that can't be the case. Like, if Myles has something to say, if Myles has a gripe, you got to make him feel heard internally so he doesn't feel the need to go out there to the media and make his point at a press conference, right? You got to be available for him, and you got to make sure that you cater to him a little bit because he's a franchise player. But that's what you have to do if you want to keep Myles Garrett happy. That's really it. Right? Like, got to do it because trading him is not an option. It's a bad value play. And he's one of the best players you've ever had in franchise history. I tried to be in a position where we don't have to trade some of the best players to ever play for the Cleveland Browns, right? Like, that's never fun when you lose a player who's one of the best ever to play for the Cleveland Browns. Never, never, never fun. Somebody said Jackson Dart is connected with the Mannings. Almost every Ole Miss quarterback is connected with the Mannings. Like Daniel Jones was connected with the Mannings. And look, Daniel Jones might be something they like kick the tires on, right? Because he can run. He could play a little play action football. Like, they might consider that too. Another thing we're going to have to do is, like, hey, we're going to have an open mind about the quarterback position and how the Browns will figure it out. Because right now I think we're kind of defaulting to Kirk Cousins. I think there's a chance they go to Kirk Cousins, but I think the Browns are going to have to be very open-minded about this And I think they're going to have to be willing to see a lot of different options out, right? Because the answer is just not going to be obvious at the quarterback position. Could Kirk Cousins be cut? Yeah, Kirk Cousins could be cut. That wouldn't be too much of a surprise here. All right. So other thing I wanted to do, other than talk about Myles Garrett, is break out the mock draft simulator for the first time live on the show here. So one, I want to walk through some scenarios about how we can get to certain places. So let me put this up on screen here for you guys so we can kind of lab out some scenarios about where the Browns could be. Yeah, somebody made the point. Next year's going to be like the Browns have to build infrastructure to protect the quarterback position, no matter what they do starting next season. Because right now they've built a team that, hey, they were thinking they're going to have a franchise quarterback. So they ain't really built a lot of training wheels around the position because they assumed that their $46 million quarterback would be a $46 million quarterback. But now that they know that's not the case, they got to put some training wheels around their quarterback position. I saw when DTR got out there, I was like, oh boy, we got no training wheels right now. Like we have no way to make this easy on the quarterback. And I think that's another thing that the Browns have to seriously try to address this offseason is, hey, how can we make playing quarterback for the Cleveland Browns easier? We talked about it with making sure the defense is better as a way to make sure it's easier to play for the Cleveland Browns. But also got to consider just other ways to make that happen here as well. All right, so we're going to bring up the draft here in just a second. I got Jacob Roach coming on at 7:30 as well. We're going to kind of go through this. But first, before we get to the mock draft portion of this, let's get to our sponsor for the day. Can we get our sponsor up on screen? Yep, Core Home Fitness. Y'all have known it. I've talked about it before. Core Home Fitness. We've recently introduced you to our new sponsors here. Look up Core Home Fitness. You can find them at corehomefitness.com and check out their assortment of lifting equipment and especially their top-rated adjustable dumbbells rated by the New York Times and Men's Health. So good stuff there with them. They are also rated a Best Buy by Consumer Reports as well. Check out their videos and other products like the Glute Drive Plus, the Fight Master, and Crush Your Goals in 2024. And going into 2025, it's that time of the year where we start getting our New Year's resolutions. They got a US-based support team, fast shipping, hassle-free returns, you name it. They know what they're doing. And again, check out corehomefitness.com for the ultimate home fitness equipment. They have stepped up to sponsor the OBR, and they rock. And make sure you get rocked out this summer and get that summer body in for sure. All right, so let's look at how the Browns can get to their draft picks this year. I got this on full screen, right? Yep, cool. Let's bring it on up. If you could bring up my screen share, Ian, on the stream. All right. So right now, as it stands, this is where we're at, right? We got one more game left. Monday Night Football, Green Bay versus New Orleans. Now, there are a couple different ways you could do this. You can simulate the end of the season. Let's just simulate the remaining games here. Let the sim engine choose. They say Green Bay won this one in a close one. All right. So if we look at the draft order, the Browns are picking 5th behind Tennessee, Jacksonville, New England, New York Giants. The Browns are the second to last 3-win team in that tiebreaker because their strength of schedule is the second highest. So that is what the tiebreaker is. So if the Browns want to move up, they got to have other teams lose. Now, let's go through week 17's games and see who would probably win. Kansas City, Pittsburgh. It doesn't really change if Pittsburgh wins that one or loses that one. But let's say Kansas City wins. Let's say Baltimore wins. We'll come back to that game in just a second. New England versus the Chargers. We'll come back to that one in a second. Let's say Cincinnati wins here. Arizona versus the Rams. Let's say the Rams win here. Buffalo versus the Jets. We know that the Buffalo Bills are likely to win that game. Another toss-up here that could affect the Browns, and there's another toss-up here that could affect the Browns. Then you have the Colts, the Giants, another toss-up here that can affect the Browns. And then Dallas, Philly. Let's assume Philly wins that one. Carolina, Tampa Bay. That one can go either way because we just saw how Tampa Bay has played the last few weeks. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games next week that I think are going to dramatically change how all of this goes for the Cleveland Browns. Because if you look at week 18, it's a lot more predictable, right? Arizona versus San Francisco could go either way. Let's just say San Francisco wins that game. Carolina versus Atlanta. You have to assume that Atlanta is going to win that. That's a must-win game for them, right? Baltimore versus Cleveland. You have to assume that Baltimore is going to win that. That's a must-win game for them. Washington versus Dallas. Assume Washington wins. Kansas City versus Denver. Let's say Denver wins. It's a must-win game for them. Minnesota versus Detroit. Let's just assume that it doesn't matter who wins that game. Green Bay, probably going to be Chicago. And then Jacksonville, Indy could be another toss-up. Seattle, Los Angeles Rams, probably going to be the Rams there. And then Chargers, and then Buffalo's definitely beating the Patriots week 18. All right. So, and then also the Chargers probably beating the Patriots here, right? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, yeah, right here. Let's just go here and then Detroit. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games this week. And then next week, when it comes to toss-ups, we have the one game here. This will probably be a Miami win, but the Jets could lose it. It doesn't really affect things too much, but we'll see. New York Giants, Philly. New York Giants are likely losing that one. And then Pittsburgh, Cincinnati. Pittsburgh needs that one, so Pittsburgh probably win that game there too. So let's go back to week 17 and see how that affects the draft order, right? Chicago, Seattle. Let's say Seattle wins that one. And again, kind of play around with these games here in this last week. Let me make sure I got everything here. Boom. And boom. Because you think that those two are probably locks here. All right. So you get to these last games, and how these games shake out will determine everything for the Cleveland Browns. If Tennessee beats Jacksonville, then those two teams flip, right? Because they're 3-loss teams. So Tennessee would be the third if they lose. Jacksonville will be the third. That determines who's there, right? It's Las Vegas wins, then Las Vegas goes up to 7. If New Orleans wins, then Las Vegas stays at 3. Indy, New York. Let's say New York puts off the upset, and they get to 3 wins there. Tampa Bay, Carolina. Let's say Carolina pulls off an upset, and then let's say Miami beats the Browns. Now, this scenario, the Browns would be the second overall pick. If the Patriots, well, the Patriots probably, let's say they pull off the upset here, then all of a sudden the Browns are the first overall pick. You could flip this. That doesn't really change things. The Browns would flip from 2 to 3. And then let's say Las Vegas loses to New Orleans, and all of a sudden the Browns are the 2 pick. The Raiders are the 4. So this thing can swing a ton depending on how these games play out. I think the order will stabilize itself by the end of next week. We'll really have a good idea of where we're at, which brings us to a mock draft. And to help me with this mock draft, ladies and gentlemen, Jacob Roach. Bring him in.
What's up?
Hey, how you doing, Jacob?
I'm doing good, man. How you doing?
You know, not bad considering where we are.
You're right. Hey, it's my time of the year to shine now, man. Like I'm like I always told everybody that that this year was going to be a win-win for me. Either they were going to be good or everybody was going to care about my draft content. So like it's one way or the other, you know.
Definitely. All right. So Have you ever done this Pro Football Network shared draft experience thing?
I have not. I've heard about it. I haven't done the shared one. A lot of times, I do love the concept behind it. I've never sat down and tried it.
Yeah. Let's see here. I don't see how I can just get a link and send it to you, right? Like that's the thing.
Yeah.
All right, we'll just have to do this old school style. You just have to. Can you see the screen pretty clearly?
Yeah, I can see it pretty good.
All right, we're gonna go 7th round here. What speed you want to go?
I always just go fast because I don't do a lot of trades. But that's totally up to you. I'm fine with either one, but I usually just go through the picks and just kind of see how it falls.
Yeah, the boards have been crazy. The variance is usually pretty nuts, but like the board, like I seen Isaiah Bond be like a 4th round pick in Pro Football Focus, and then like he's like a 1st round pick lock in other boards. What was it? Nick Singleton's the other one with a ton of variance too.
Yeah. A couple of the offensive tackles that may move into guard are the same way as well. Is like it can be very. I use NFL Mock Draft Database because they try to combine that stuff, but doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be that accurate.
Yeah, and then like what Kate Klubnik's always there in like the 7th round. I'm like, if he declared, he would be gone.
He's like, I looked at that today. He's their like 343rd ranked overall prospect, which is
it's nuts. There's guys. I'm like, this guy's gonna get drafted, and like he's not even on their board anymore. Like what Jackson Woodard is like not there. I'm like, he's the 2nd team All-American. Like he's probably gonna get picked up somewhere, at least 6th, 7th round. But
I was working on a mock draft that I'm going to write up, a written mock draft for the OBR later this week. I'm going to do a video on that one for this weekend as well. But I was going through it. And I got to the 3rd round, and Xavier Watts, the safety from Notre Dame's there in the 3rd round. I'm like, this is fat chance. And so I didn't select him because I'm like, there's just no way.
All right, let's have some fun here. Let's go through 7 rounds of the mock here and see what we get. So, oh damn, yeah, you saw what I saw, huh?
Yes, immediately. I'm like, this is not great for me.
All right, so pick 5. Tampa Bay wants to trade you 18, 50, 119, and a 2nd next year for it. Good Lord, are they trying to get Cam Ward? Like,
what's really funny about that sometimes is that is what they'll do, and it's like they just gave Baker $100 million, and then the simulator will be like, they're gonna mortgage the farm for somebody else, and you're like, what's going on here?
Yeah, well, I guess it would be a slight mortgaging of the farm, right? Like it would be kind of a justifiable one. How do you feel about this offer?
I've still got Mason Graham on the board, correct?
Yeah, you got Mason Graham here. Travis Hunter's here too.
Oh God, yeah, no, I don't think I can accept that.
That's probably who they want. That's got to be who they want, right? Yeah. So Travis Hunter, Mason Graham. I think this is an interesting scenario though to talk about.
Very much so.
Because Travis Hunter, I think, is a extraordinary corner prospect. I think he's a pretty fun wide receiver prospect, but he's going to play corner in the NFL. Mason Graham, not as exciting of a name there, right? But I think of all of these guys, like I think my big locks for like the best players in this draft, Abdul Carter has the highest upside. Like he could be a defensive player of the year candidate. He has like a 22.4 pass rush win rate at Penn State. He's getting better every week, right? He could easily become the next Micah Parsons. Ashton Jeanty, he's just amazing, right? You watch him, half man, half amazing. Like at the Jacksonville Jaguars draft, they will be a better football team, right? Like there's nobody who's going to make you better quicker than Ashton Jeanty. And then if you are Mason Graham to me is like, that's the lock. He's going to be good. He's going to make a Pro Bowl or two. He's going to be a good football player. You're going to talk about him like Big Jeff, right? Like good run defender, solid pass rusher, really dependable guy. And then Travis Hunter is another wild card to me because like I think he's a really good corner instincts, really good zone corner prospect. My issue with him is injury history. Can he stay healthy? Like, is he always going to be like slightly nicked up? Yeah. And then you already got Denzel Ward, right? Do you want to have both of those issues kind of sitting there waiting to pop up on a week-to-week basis. And we're talking about, oh, wait till we get them both together, right? Like, and it never happens. And then also, he is a really good zone corner, and that kind of concerns me because I'm like, those are the dudes who tackle more, right? Like, those are the guys you ask to get a little bit more physical. So, like, if you're worried about health, that's another thing that could pop up. I've seen, and like the temptation to make this dude return punts, to put him on trick plays, put him in situations to get tackled. Like, my fear with him is kind of like, is this like drafting Reggie Bush?
Oh.
Where you're like, oh man, the idea of this dude is so amazing because you saw him do some of the most incredible stuff you've ever seen a college athlete do. But then the application of it is actually way less impactful than you thought because how you have to use him in the NFL where he's just not going to be able to take as many hits, right? Or take as much of a beating physically. So that's my thing with him. Are you drafting Reggie Bush, right? Where it's like, you're going to feel great about it. Heisman Trophy winner, spectacular. But then you try to use him and it always feels like you're not getting enough from him, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what the Reggie Bush number 2 overall experience was. I don't think enough people had that conversation because, again, with these like Colorado kids, I feel like we've had the dumbest conversations possible about them. Is it Dion, right? And all, but like they have actual questions you need to ask that we have not asked yet. And I think that's an important one to ask with Travis is like, okay, like let's not go with, oh, he's a trash corner, he's this, that, he's a two-way. Like, okay, leave all your freaking Heisman arguments behind now that this shit's over. Right. Now let's talk about him as a prospect, and he's a fantastic prospect. But he comes with some things that pop up, you're like, I don't know, right? Mason Graham, though, I draft him. I'm not even thinking about Mason Graham for the next 3 years. I'm like, no, he's going to be good. He's going to start. He's going to be good. We're not worried about like getting the most out of him. But if you do get the most out of Travis Hunter, he could be the best corner in football.
Yeah, it's the Family Guy bit, right? The hey, it's a boat or it's the mystery box, which could be a boat. It could be anything, and you're like, it could be anything. But this item here, I know exactly what this boat is. Like, yeah, I pulled up the data on, and I'm not the PFF is be all end all guy. I'm not trying with any of that stuff. But the 92.4 run defense grade is why I say his floor.
2 years back to back.
Yeah.
Like that's that with Mason Graham, you like he's never been bad. Like Abdul Carter, you look at his early stuff, he's like, okay, he definitely developed. But when he got there, good Lord, he got there. Right. You're seeing it right now in the playoff. Mason Graham is like, nah, he was a vital part to that championship team last year.
Yeah.
like he was a vital part as a freshman, right? Like he's been that guy since he stepped on the football field. Just a worry about like, hey man, how much can a really, really good, solid defensive tackle help you? I think this is one of those classic draft situations where everybody expects somebody to do it in the top 3, right? With Travis Hunter or Shedeur Sanders. And they fall and teams go, oh, didn't expect that. I'ma just stick with my board, and they go Mason Graham here, right? Like this is one of those where it feels like teams are like just like when Laramie Tunsil fails, like nah, I don't know.
Yeah, you're sitting there as the Dolphins, and they're just like, oh, that's what you want to do. Like I see the comment, you got to go quarterback here. I would just preface this by saying I would be shocked if Cam Ward's there at 5. Like I would think in this scenario, which changes it a little bit, I would be really, really shocked if the Titans don't take him, or if Vegas doesn't jump the Browns to take him. I love Cam Ward. He's QB1 for me. He's got a ridiculous amount of arm talent. But, oh, man, I just sit here and I think, again, it's the Family Guy meme, right? Because you're like, Mason Graham, like, you're not going to be able to run out the clock in a close game very often when Mason Graham's in the middle. Like, if if you're playing the
He is
Bengals,
he like the way you can pair him with Myles is this, right? Mason Graham makes it so you get a lot of third and longs.
yes.
Like that's what keeps them out of third and short situations, right? So, like, if you have somebody who's dominant in third and long, and you got somebody who's really good at making sure you stay in third and long, you basically got a recipe for putting the offense in hell all game. And I'm not as high on Cam Ward as others are.
Yeah.
So, me personally, I'm like, now turn that card in for Mason Graham. Man.
And I think I come there just solely based on like, hey, if it's 24-21 and the Bengals have the ball and they think they're going to run it up the gut to run the clock out with Mason Graham, I feel pretty good that they're not gonna.
Yeah, you can get away with a lot of different quarterbacks if you have a defense that can dominate on the line of scrimmage. And I think right now, if you're the Browns, you're kind of in this tight little balance too, where you can't be bad next year, right? And like you draft a quarterback, you might be bad next year, right? Because that guy's not guaranteed to play. Or if he does, he's not guaranteed to be good. I've watched DTR out there. My main thing I was thinking, we got no training wheels. Like we got no training wheels installed. We need to get some training wheels. We need to get some tight ends. We need some running backs. Like we need to give this kid a tackle. We need to get this kid some training. Well, not this kid, but like any kid that you throw out there, some training wheels. And no bigger set of training wheels for a quarterback than a defense that you ain't got to worry about if that ball on that other side, man. You gonna get it back, dog, and it's gonna be just how you left it.
Right. It's like, oh man, don't worry that you missed that throw on 3rd and 4. There's 10 minutes left, and you're gonna get like 2 more cracks at it. It's
what kept Joe Flacco able to be. Oh wow, Tyler Warren to the Bengals would be pretty scary, but it's what kept Joe Flacco upright, right? Is that he threw those interceptions, but how many times did they actually turn into points here, right?
As long as it wasn't returned for points, you felt pretty good. Felt pretty good he was going to get the ball back.
So you're sitting at 36 here. They offer you 53, a second and a 4. I don't think I like that one. Do you like that one?
Not really. That's a
85. Okay, yeah, you're just playing in my face at this point.
Yeah, that's like I'll go back 10 picks, maybe.
All right. So we're sitting at 36. You got Milroe available if you want to go quarterback. Let's see here. What positions should we look at first?
Give me the 2 offensive tackle and guard.
We got Essery.
Oh.
We got Donovan Jackson.
Did that tell you what I like?
We got Parker Brailsford, who is way too early for him.
Parker Brailsford went back to college.
Yeah. He did?
Yeah.
Yeah, usually those Alabama guys get out there as soon as possible. I wonder if that means if Milroe.
That's what shocked me because he's like one of the better centers in a center class that's not good. And then he was like, I'll just go back.
Okay. Yeah. It's like Mahim was supposed to be way better this year than he was. So you like the tackle here?
I like Ursery a lot. Like you're talking about a big guy. Like if you're looking big tackle, 6'6", 330, big mauler type, more of a pass blocker than a run blocker because I think he needs to improve on some of that stuff. But his highest run blocking aspect of his game is zone. He's got a 79.7 zone grade.
Mm-hmm.
So even, which is kind of shocking because he's enormous, that it's kind of that stuff. But, some of the bread and butter that Kevin Stefanski does there, I think he's a left tackle that comes in and he can, he's a 3-year starter at left tackle at Minnesota. I have a 1st-round grade on him, like plainly put. So I like that a lot, but there's a lot of other directions you could easily talk me into.
Hey, if you like Travis Hunter, you got to like Ayo Manor, right?
He is a cheat. Like when College Football 25 first came out, he is a cheat code. You just run little crossing routes because he has like 90 something speed and his acceleration is like 95. So you just do a little drag route and you just dump it off to him. And he should not be as big as he is and able to run that fast.
Yeah, and if like the thing with him where I wonder, I'm like, how much higher of a prospect would he be if he had a good team around him, right? Like Stanford's been pretty much a joke, like for the last few years. And I'm like, man, if he was on a good team, he probably would be way higher up because, like, you look at it, like he's 6'2", 209, strong, like really well built, and like a pretty good route runner too. Like, I wonder if he does any. Like, is he too young for the All-Star games? He's a junior, right?
I think he's going.
Is he going East-West? Don't do that to him, Dion.
I think he's going. Yeah, he's going to the Senior Bowl.
He's going Senior Bowl?
Yep.
Well, he's going to go up, dog. He's going in the first round.
If you're looking for what I think can be a really – he's got that great blend of size, power, and speed that, like, you know, Corey Kinnon's talked about it on Twitter and made good points. Like, you're talking about Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman as guys that have like – what was it? They have 3 wide receivers that have 15 career catches under contract next year, and one's David Bell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So as much as I like the tackles in this spot, if you're like, hey, get me a weapon, like Eli Manor, man, like that dude can play.
Yeah, like if you get any of these dudes here, I'm like, man, Manor's there. I got Xavier Estrepo and my Lad McConkey guy for this year. I'm like, he's gonna go to Senior Bowl, and people are like, oh yeah, he's pretty good, right? Because like there are times I remember I watched Georgia Tech in Miami. I'm like, he would have gone off for 200 if like Cam Ward decided to get the ball out on time.
He catches everything. He's a steel trap. Like anything you throw at him, he's going to catch it. I have him like more closer to, I think you can get him in the 3rd round because I think he's slot only at the next level.
Yeah.
But like, that's a lot of fun. Like a slot guy that's going to catch everything. Sure.
I think he's going to be one of them dudes that, like, okay, he gets in an all-star game setting. You get to see him run some one-on-one routes and stuff. Like him and A.M. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, no. Like,
yeah.
This is going to change for them, right? So where are we at? Tackle or wide receiver here? Because
it gets a little bit. I think you can get more tackles in the 3rd round than you can wide receiver. Like I know that I say this. Good.
Yeah, it gets tough. Like at the like this line here, it's like, all right, well, now we're talking about Pat Bryant.
Yeah. Yeah, or you're waiting a really long time and banking on UNLV's Ricky White because I like him a ton, but like
you're talking about like taking like a Rock Taylor or something like that. Like, oh yeah, he's got good size or something. He showed something last year, but he didn't really play that well this year.
I say this as a guy that is writing up a mock draft with a tackle in the 2nd round. I'm good with Elick though. If you feel inclined for that direction, I think it would be.
Yeah, I would be happy with Elick there. I think that he also gives you like a level of physicality you just don't have because Judy's not super physical. He's going to be a good blocker on the edge. So if you want to do some of that wide zone stuff, he's going to be that day one.
Especially if you put him out there with Cedric Tillman, like on the same side.
Yeah, he could do some of that muscle stuff that Amari Cooper used to do, right? Like, especially, again, we're talking about training wheels. The best training wheel, just run a slant, right? Quick slant, win, off strength, boom, right there. That's training wheels right there. That would be a heavily criticized pick because I don't think a lot of people are going to know about him.
No.
Until, like, maybe the Senior Bowl goes. But, like, I think that's going to be a pick that people get excited about once they see it.
What you're immediately going to do is you're going to go 63 catches for 831 yards. And you're going to be like, why are my draft? Because I get it. Numbers, stats, especially if you haven't watched a guy, you're like, I don't understand why I'm taking a guy that didn't have 1,000 yards. And it's like, well, his quarterback was trash. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah. Like absolutely trash. All right. So we're sitting here, 67. Restrepo's there. Tez Johnson, I think, is another funny one. It's like he is like legit, like explosive. Like when you watch Oregon, he's just so skinny. He's
just 160 pounds.
Yeah, and it's like I don't know, man. Like that's dangerous. Nick Singleton, Le'Veon Moss, Ollie Gore. Are you looking at running back at this point, or are we peeking over at the quarterback range here? Because you got like I don't know. What do you feel about these dudes? Because I feel real good about these guys. Maybe like Carson Beck, Dalen Gabriel, where is it? Riley Leonard, maybe. Like if he has a really good game versus Georgia, that's going to change things for him. Jackson Dart. Curtis Work, I've just 2 bad games versus high tier competition just like completely turns me off of him, even though like most of his tape's good. But those are the 4 names I go comp third, 4th round.
Yeah,
I could do it.
Yeah.
You know, but anywhere earlier, it's got to be a situation where you just don't love anybody on the board, right?
Yeah, because I went back and watched more Jackson Dart this weekend, and I just came away meh. Like I just kind of like there's nothing with him that stands out to me, and that's not to say he's terrible, but just like with Curtis Rourke, if he's trailing in the 4th quarter, Jackson Dart falls apart. Like it does not matter who he's playing, he's gonna fall apart if he doesn't have a lead to lean on in the 4th quarter, and like. I think right now for me in this spot, I'm looking at the offensive line, rather it's inside or outside, because I think I can get a running back in the 4th or 5th round and be very happy with it, because that's
what do you think of Josh Connerly here?
Connerly is
the left.
If Josh Connerly's here, you sprint that to the podium.
Donovan Jackson here too.
Oh man. See, here's the thing. So Josh Connerly is going to be really interesting. See what he does against Ohio State. That's going to do a lot of things there. One of my favorite. He's back at it. I love the format of his new show. But Todd McShay's show came back. He started a show a couple of months ago. He's got Connerly as his tackle 1. Like he's got him at his 1, and I'm seeing him in the 2nd and the 3rd a lot. I think PFF has him.
I know when I watch Dylan Gabriel's tape, I'm like, man. They keep him clean.
PFF has Connerly at 111, which I think is criminal. They do keep him clean. Like
Josh Simmons is here too.
Oh my goodness. So this is all going to be dependent on what you think of who you've got at left tackle. By then we'll know who we have at left tackle if we have anybody else on the roster. Josh Simmons was going to be my tackle 1, I think. Vehemently, the way he was playing when he went down, he was going to be tackle 1. I still kind of lean Connerly just because I know he's going to play next year and not miss time. You're talking about a dude
that's DeJuan who's coming off that tibula, right? Like it's just I don't think we're in the position to take that gamble.
Yeah, and Connerly's allowed 2 sacks in 3 years.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
If you must know, and I thought he plays well. I'm really excited to see what he does against Ohio State again. Ohio State was one of his weaker games this year, but I just think he's really established himself as a really good pass blocker. That's where I would lean, because I think Connerly, you plug him in, I feel good about that, especially if it's in the 3rd round. Like I think the value there would be just astronomical.
Yeah, I think he's going to do like what Roger Rosengarten did last year, where you get him at the Senior Bowl and you're like, holy shit, this guy's good. Like, oh shit, he can get out there in space. Because that was what Roger last year at the Senior Bowl. You just saw him out there and you're like, oh fuck, dude, he's good. He can move. He got good hands. Like he runs guys around. He's physical. It's like, oh yeah. And then you look at him now, he's like, yeah, he's pro ready. Nobody in Mobile was surprised, right? When you watch him on tape now for the Ravens, because it's like, yeah, man, he did that for 3 straight days.
He just got buried. He just got buried, especially because they weren't yet in the Big Ten, but he got buried on the West Coast. Nobody was watching those games.
That happens a lot. Well, that used to happen a lot with those Pac-12 guys, you know?
Yeah, that's why I'm excited for guys like Connerly and stuff being in the Big Ten. I think he's getting a lot more buzz.
Now, do you go sicko mode here and get Josh Simmons again now that you're back here at 93? I would be tempted. Your best players available according to this board here, and we're going to have to peace out after we get this pick in.
Okay.
Dart, Gunnar Helms here.
And Gunnar Helms here, sprint it.
Yeah, I'm thinking Gunnar Helm too. Right?
We got a remade offense just in the first 2 days of the draft. Look at us.
Yeah. Let's go Gunnar Helm, and then we can look at our picks here. So Mason Graham, Elick Ailmanor, got a new tackle, got a new tight end, and you feel so much better going into next season if you get what you know. Mason's going to probably be good early on. Ailmanor has these are guys who would probably play well early. too. I think.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Like none of these guys are projects, right? Like
Yep.
A.O. Manner's going to come in here. He's going to be one of the biggest wide receivers you have on the roster, right? So
immediately.
Yeah, so you're going to be able to get these guys out there. Connolly's probably like the most pro-ready build of any tackle in this draft. And the same thing with Gunnar Helm, Tyler Warren's the most pro-ready build of any tight end in this draft.
Yeah, but Gunnar Helm's got Gunnar Helm's game is very translatable as well.
Yeah, he plays in that Texas offense. And basically, they run that offense. We don't trust our quarterback offense, right? Like, which is going to be really helpful, right? You talk about getting safety, you talk about getting training wheels around your quarterback. This is how you do it, right? You get something that's going to solidify the defense. You get a wide receiver who's going to help him out. You get an offensive tackle who's going to hopefully hold down that left tackle position, and then you get a tight end who can also be a safety blanket. Now you got 2 tight end sets with David Njoku, Gunnar Helm. You feel really good about that. So make your job easier. So when you go in the 4th round and, you look at quarterback and you're like, oh yeah, Carson Beck's there, Will Howard's there, Dylan Gabriel's there. Maybe you get somebody that works in that position. But Jacob, thank you for coming on, helping me with this mock draft. Always appreciate when you can join me here. And I want to thank you guys for joining us here, but make sure you stay tuned. We got the legend Fred Greetham and Barry McBride on next on the OBR Network. So make sure you check them out. Peace.